This is Talk Radio.
Across the UK, online, on DAB+, and on the Talk Radio app. Evenings with Kevin O'Sullivan
On Talk Radio.
Well, I think we're all a bit shocked by the amount of money that MPs are earning outside their MP salary for various consultancies, other jobs. They've got a good thing going, lots of them. But we thought we'd get the young person's viewpoint on all of this by talking to our friend, Head of Young Voices UK, Jason Reed. Evening, Jason.
Good evening, Kevin.
Now, we're well aware that Owen Paterson was getting more than £100,000 a year lobbying for two companies, Randox and Lynn's Country Foods. They call these arrangements consultancies, but basically these MPs are paid vast amounts of money to lobby for these companies' interests. We found out that Tory former Chief Whip Julian Smith, he gets 144 grand for three firms. Chris Grayling, former Transport Secretary, £100,000. Mark Garnier, £90,000. Liberal Democrat leader Sir Ed Davey receives £78,000 for consultancy work. He says it goes towards helping benefit his disabled son. Of course he does. The Labour are having a field day. The Tory sleaze. No. It's Westminster sleaze. We just heard Ed Davey, leader of the Lib Democrats. David Lammy, that well-known Labour luminary, Secretary of State for Shadow Secretary of State for Justice. He earns £40,000 for LBC, £4,100 for a speech to City University, £2,500 from Mishcon de Rea, the law firm, £2,500, and on it goes. Sir Keir Starmer, just before becoming Labour leader, earned £25,934 in legal fees. He was discussing also a consultancy with Mishcon de Rea, the big legal company. He said it didn't come into anything. He actually denied he was in talks, but conceded he was in discussions. I'm not sure what the difference is. Margaret Hodge, Dan Jarvis, Chris Bryant, Khalid Mahmood. This explains, Jason, why the Labour Party, while furiously attacking Tory sleaze, has been curiously quiet on the issue of second jobs and consultancies for MPs, doesn't it? This isn't a Tory party problem, it's a cross-party problem.
You're absolutely right. This problem is endemic across the entire political class. The Labour Party spokespeople, when they talk about, as you say, Tory sleaze, they like to be very loud and very brash about how awful it is. But then when you try to drill them on what the Labour Party position is and what they actually think about the issue, then there are all these caveats and all these nuances that suddenly come out of the woodwork. Angela Rayner was talking about how important it is that some Labour MPs are doctors, for example, when she was asked about it. But being a doctor and being a lobbyist are two completely different things. There is no need to conflate them at all. That's just an excuse where MPs, there was a group of MPs today who came out and said, we'd love to regulate MPs lobbying more closely, but actually we can't. Actually, it's really difficult to formulate a law around that issue. So they're ready to govern every other aspect of our lives. They're ready to, regulate the internet and pass all these incredibly complex laws on incredibly complex issues. But when it comes to regulating their own finances and regulating their own side gigs, suddenly it's far too complicated and we can't touch that issue.
Yes, you touched on a point that I've been making. I'm not saying it makes me feel that comfortable that so many MPs feel they're able to do other jobs as well as the job of being a representative of the people. But this is a free country. And if I get offered another job and I think I can fit it in, I'm entitled to do so. And I feel the same about MPs. So if you're a lawyer or if you're a doctor, or if you have your own company or any other outside commercial interests, job-wise, you're entitled to do that job. But you're quite right. It's entirely different to taking what they call consultancy fees, which is basically pocketing money to represent the interests of private commercial enterprises and companies in the Houses of Parliament. That's not what they're voted into government for. They're voted into government to represent their constituencies. So it is the area of consultancies that I think they have to look into and think about banning, no matter what fine words they come up with about the difficulty of formulating laws around this. Of course they would, wouldn't they?
I think the way that politicians talk about this is very patronizing. They talk as if you and I, as if people who aren't MPs can't possibly understand what's going on. It's perfectly obvious to anyone that if you're getting thousands and thousands of pounds in your pocket for just a few hours work, it's not because of your brilliant advice and because of your unique insight into the issues, which is going to benefit these companies. It's because you are a member of Parliament, or possibly in some cases a government minister, in the case of Owen Paterson, with the ability to do things that ordinary people can't do, because you have a degree of power, you have respect that comes with that position. And so they are abusing the power that we give them as their voters in order to put money in their own pockets. It's perfectly obvious to everyone what's going on, and there's no reason at all why it should continue to happen as blatantly as it is happening at the moment.
Yeah, I think that there are tighter rules for cabinet ministers, secretaries of state and cabinet ministers. Yeah. But it is surprising how many of these people who get very lucrative consultancy deals are former secretaries of state, who obviously know the people in positions of power, if you see what I'm getting at.
Yeah, we need to somehow put a stop to this system where people who go into government, then they get booted out of the cabinet, and then they suddenly become the richest, one of the richest people in their sector, because they're able to rake it in from passing on all that wisdom to the private sector. We need public servants. We need people in those positions who actually care about the issues. I know you said you're tolerant of people having second jobs, but I'm very skeptical about it when it's MPs, especially if you're when you think that they're running a busy constituency office, they're having to deal with casework in addition to any other responsibilities if they sit on all party parliamentary groups for particular issues. And so having so many hours each month to give to outside companies seems to me like a stretch. And I think the explanation for that is that they're not giving all the hours they say they're giving. In reality, they're just pocketing the money and then sending a few choice emails on behalf of their clients to whatever important regulator counts in that sector, and making a huge amount of money, while their underpaid staff are working extremely hard trying to answer their constituents' concerns.
I mean, but I suppose, I take your point. I'm not particularly comfortable about jobs, some MPs doing 3 other jobs. But it is a free country, and as long as those jobs do not involve directly using their influence to change government decisions or to talk to ministers to see if they can get them to do this and that for particular companies, as long as those jobs don't involve that, I'm not sure we should encroach on that basic right to be able to do as many jobs as you want. And of course, at the next election, if I was up against Geoffrey Cox, Sir Geoffrey Cox, who's earning £1.5 million a year in the British Virgin Islands, I would be making that a bit of an electoral issue. So if the constituents of wherever he represents decide that's fine by us, that's democracy for you. So, yeah, I take your point, but it's the consultancies I think they've got to look at first. Now, Jason, let's move on, because I know that you want to talk about panic deforestation. Tell us what you mean.
Well, I think we've all heard a huge amount about COP26 and how much of a waste of time it's been. At the beginning, we were told that it was going to be all about climate change. It was going to be all about net zero and getting all these different commitments from different countries. And then it turned out that the countries who pollute the most, where those commitments might actually mean something, like China and India, aren't even going to bother to turn up to COP26. And then we had that one commitment from India that they would achieve net zero by 2070, which was much, much later than all of the Western leaders were hoping for. But they have to tout that as a victory because they've got nothing else. Now we're moving on to something else because they've realized they've got no victories to speak of at all. So now they're reaching for any issue that they can find. And the one they've gone for most recently is deforestation. They're trying to claim that they're passing all these new rules and all these new regulations and all this new knowledge about deforestation and saving the Amazon rainforest. But of course, as you might expect, the measures they're proposing will have no impact at all on saving the Amazon, but they will have a huge impact on you and me and our pockets. The example that I looked at particularly was the EU wanting to crack down on palm oil. Palm oil is one of those things is in absolutely everything. I believe it's supposed to be over 50% of packaged products on supermarket
it's
shelves.
an extremely cheap form of oil that you can use in food, and it has been ecologically disastrous in many areas of the earth.
It has, yeah. It's in everything from cake to deodorant. But in recent years, the industry, as you would expect, has come under a huge amount of pressure to be more sustainable and to kill fewer koala bears. And they've produced a load of sustainable palm oil, which then the food companies and others who buy palm oil for their products, they haven't bought it. They're still buying the original harmful, deforesting version of the palm oil, which just goes to show, I think, that you can't solve a huge issue like deforestation by making life harder for you and me and by making things more expensive, taxing them and regulating them. It's only the big industries that can actually make a difference. We won't actually have any impact on palm oil's potential to cause deforestation until, for example, the food industry makes its own commitment to only buy palm oil that doesn't involve chopping down half the Amazon rainforest. And at the moment, they're not willing to do that, but we have to suffer through all this virtue signaling from world leaders at COP26, telling us that if we all do our bit, we can all save the Amazon.
As I understood it, Jason, as far as I could work out, the agreement on deforestation was that all the major nations of the mostly that don't even have forests, but I think Brazil, for example, was involved, that they would agree to take significant steps starting in the year 2030. Last time I looked, that's 9 years away. It's hardly a kind of drastic change to existing policy, is it?
Exactly, yeah. It was a really poor move on the part of not just our government, but other governments around the world to make such a big thing of COP26 for the last few months, to tell us that it was going to solve all of our problems and that this was going to be the time when the world comes together and turns the tide on climate change and solves all these other side issues like deforestation, when it was never going to happen. It was always going to be a virtue signaling fest where all the headlines are about Greta Thunberg singing rather than any actual policies, any actual agreements being made. And that's exactly what we're seeing now. The fact that, as I say, they're resorting to virtue signaling about deforestation just goes to show they've got no virtue signaling left to do about net zero and climate change, because they used it all up in the first week of the conference.
Yeah, and they haven't really achieved anything. And just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, in came Barack Obama yesterday to make exactly the same speech as every single other one of those COP26 hypocrites have made over the past few years, past few days. Save the world. I'm off. I've got my private jet over there. It's unbelievable. You just could not make this stuff up. Jason, always a pleasure. Good to talk, mate. Thank you very much. Jason Reed, head of Young Voices UK.